Well, hello, Ronin leaders. Welcome to a very abbreviated Ronin Leadership podcast. This is just an end of the year kind of message to all of you. First of all, to thank all of you for subscribing to our channel. And we've seen a lot of growth this year, close to 2,500 subscribers. And so really want to thank all of you for subscribing to the channel and supporting it. Also for sharing the content, making comments, liking the content. Really appreciate that. It's been an interesting year, and I know it's been an election year, so we've had a lot of things going on in the U.S., in our country, during this year. But I just thought I wanted to take just a few minutes to let you know how much I appreciate all of you and all of your support. As you can see, I've got QVC over here because this is the time of year when, besides football, I'm watching, and Christmas movies, I'm watching a lot of QVC and HSN. I kind of got hooked on those a couple of years ago, and so just see what deals I can get. So I kind of have this in the background, got a little Christmas music in the background on the main TV. But just some thoughts about the year. The year started off very interesting, and with a big surprise for me and for my wife when she was diagnosed with breast cancer back in January. Started the testing and was really diagnosed, and that was not such a fun time, as she had to go through some procedures, but she's doing well now, very healthy, cancer-free. So the end of the year started off very well. But I'll tell you that there were some scary moments there as well. Had to rely on our faith as well as my practice of stoicism to really remember that there are things that are simply going to be out of your control. And remember, this is a leadership podcast primarily, though we've done a fun one recently about me making martinis, which should be out soon. But this is a leadership podcast, and one of the things that you as leaders, as you're getting ready to go into 2025, need to understand, we all feel like we have to control everything, or we must control everything, but you can't. Every day you're going to be presented with new challenges, and you're going to have to figure out how to maneuver through those challenges even when you don't have control. And so as long as you have a mindset that you can only control what you can control, and most things are out of your control. So if you come into that with that mindset, you'll always be ready, expecting the unexpected. And so that's something that in this world, especially where things change on a dime, you as leaders have to really be able to adapt to changing conditions. We certainly had to do in our personal lives. We didn't know whether we were going to be able to travel this year and do a lot of the other things, but we managed to deal with it and to move forward. But a couple of things, I took down some notes just so I could kind of remember and keep my thoughts together. During this election year, it was a very interesting, I guess, lesson in leadership, or in many cases, lack of leadership. And again, I don't care what party you belong to. At the end of the day, one of the things that always galls me is that people never own up to their mistakes. And one of the things you find out, you see, especially from politicians, so-called leaders, is it's never their fault. It's always somebody else's fault, the other party's fault. It's not my fault. Even though you're supposedly in charge, or you're running this department, or you're president, or governor, or whatever, it's never your fault. Well, yeah, it is your fault, because if it's on your watch, it's your fault. You may not have had a hand in it, in whatever happened that went south, but you as a leader have to take ownership as Jocko Willink calls it, extreme ownership for your actions and your organization. Earlier in the year, I did a podcast and I talked about a situation where Jocko was involved in a friendly fire incident when he was in Ramadi in Iraq, which which took the life of a friendly, of an Iraqi combatant that was working with his unit. And when they were hauled in front of their commander, instead of Jocko pointing the finger at people on his SEAL team, he said, "No, I own this. I'm in charge. I'm the commander." And of course, some of the other SEALs in his unit owned up, and they said, "Well, no, it was my fault. No, it was my fault." So as a team, they were backing each other up. But Jocko took ownership. And what you don't see in many of our politicians and political folks and the talking heads in the media is they don't take ownership for anything. It's always somebody else's fault. No. If it's on your watch in your organization, you take the blame. And you suffer the consequences. And that's all part of leadership. That's just the way it is. Oh, that's my doggy barking at something, so it's no big deal. But you take ownership for it. And so that's something I want you to go into the new year remembering as a leader. Hopefully things will go hunky-dory every day, 365, 24/7. But you know that's not going to happen. Things are going to go south one way or the other. And as I said earlier, you're going to get hit with the unexpected. So just be prepared, and be prepared for some of your troops to maybe step in it on times. And you'll deal with that from a disciplinary measure or a remedial measure later. But at the end of the day, if you're in charge, as Harry Truman used to say, had that famous sign on his desk when he was president, the buck stops here. Buck stops with you. And what you find with a lot of these so-called leaders in politics, it's never their fault. It's always somebody else's fault. I don't consider them real leaders anyway, and I've talked about that this year. The other thing I want to talk about is to be tolerant of other people's opinions. And I think one of the things that we have found out, especially in this election cycle, is that there's a lot of intolerance, and a lot of intolerance on people with differing political opinions. And part of what makes this country great is that we should be able to have political discourse without name calling or stereotyping or everything else, right? Or demonizing. That's the word, demonizing. And people like to demonize too much. As a leader, you have to avoid that. You have to avoid demonizing people. Real leaders don't do that. And you find the media doing that a lot, demonizing the other side of a political situation, as opposed to, they're supposed to be journalists, having an open mind and being objective enough to look at both sides, but you don't find that nowadays. And so I find that most journalists, just like I talked about politicians or so-called leaders, most people in the media are so-called journalists, not real journalists. They're talking heads with scripts and editors and a certain political bent or bias. And to me, that's not leadership either. So you need to make sure that you're tolerant of other people's opinions. Again, this is what makes America great. There are many places in this world where you render a political opinion, you could die, you get killed. And unfortunately, we've seen a similar thing here, though it's not the norm, with President-elect Trump. 2 assassination attempts on his life because people didn't agree with him politically. And I dare say there's probably a lot of people on the left that probably feel the same way. And hopefully they'll never be able to manifest their anger towards him. We're a democracy. We have the right to render our opinions. And don't be afraid to render your opinion, no matter what it is, but also be tolerant of other people's opinions. The other thing I wrote down here was to always learn. You can always learn from others, even if you don't like them and are not friends or don't agree with them on some business issues. At the end of the day, you can always learn from someone else. And a lesson of this, and again, I find this political landscape this year to be really interesting when it comes to leadership lessons. Um, when President Biden took office 4 years ago, the first thing he did on the first day in office was to totally wipe out with executive orders everything that Trump had done, including safeguards at the border, which obviously led to a total collapse of border security and immigration controls and all that other good stuff. And immigration, we could talk about that for days. My point is, real leaders, when you go into a situation where you're taking over from someone else, right, your predecessor, you don't just throw everything away and just say, okay, I'm just going to do everything my way. You take a look at all the things that your predecessor has done, and obviously you'll be coming in with your own set of expectations, goals, desires, strategic initiatives, but you need to take a look at the lay of the land first and say, okay, these things are working, these things I'm going to tweak, and these things I'm going to get rid of. You don't just come in like Biden and just willy-nilly just change everything because you didn't like your predecessor, right? I mean, that's not leadership. He should have looked at things, and even though if he doesn't like Trump personally and doesn't like his political philosophy and blah, 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 as a leader, you look at things objectively and you say, if this is going to work for my organization, my enterprise, even though I didn't do it, and even though I may not like the person that I took over from when I was, let's say you're a chief security officer, and you just took over an enterprise from a chief security officer that either retired or quit or moved on to something else or whatever. But at the end of the day, maybe you're not in alignment with how that person ran the CSO shop, this global security shop, or whatever you call it, in your particular company. But you still have an obligation to take a look at what that person did and see whether or not any of that stuff is working. If it is, it shouldn't be an ego blow to you. Hey, if it's working, let's keep it. Just keeps my organization that I've just inherited, I just took over, better. So you can always learn from others. And so politicians are really good about showing you what not to do from a leadership perspective, right? Very, very good about that. What's this? Sometimes I got to use my peepers now because I'm, getting older here. Yeah. As we go into 2025, we'll have, hopefully a lot more content and more guests and, all this other good stuff that's coming by. But I think I want to leave you with just a quick, some quick thoughts. Everybody goes into the end of the year and you're going to make resolutions, and I think that's a good thing. Always good to reset. But I've talked about a lot of things this year, and I want you to go into 2025 with a couple of things in mind to make you better leaders. Number one is to model best behaviors, okay? Take a look at the leaders that you admire, study them, read about them. I read about, I would read about Colin Powell and Ronald Reagan and Condoleezza Rice and Golda Meir and all these other leaders. I would read about them just to find out how they ticked and then maybe glean best practices. It's important for you to model best behaviors, or whether it's behaviors of some of the colleagues in your world. I looked at CSOs, and when I first became a CSO, and I looked at those, and as I got to know them, I realized, wow, they really have it together. They're great leaders. They take care of their troops. They communicate well. They're selfless. And, someone's at the front door. Hold it. Sorry there. There seems to be a break in the the podcast. Doorbell rang. It was Amazon. Dogs are barking, so I had to go get it. That's kind of par for the course, as you all know, in this time of year. But going back to my thoughts, hey, look, just remember to model best behaviors, right? And learn. Always learning. You're always learning. You're always learning. You're always growing. Remember, I always say this is a journey. It's always continuous. So just remember, you're always learning. The other thing is that you have to make sure that you start each day correctly. You know, I have this routine, and I can afford to do this routine now because I'm retired. But even when I wasn't retired, I had a routine where you have to figure out that morning, right? Tackle the morning. And that means whether it's working out, meditation, prayer, what have you, get yourself centered in the morning. Do not open that email right away. That's going to screw your day up because it's going to be nothing but problems, right? If I did that when I was chief security officer, you know, again, unless the balloon goes up and I get a call saying, hey, Mike, you got to take a look at this right away, I'm going to not look at that thing right away. I'm going to pray, meditate, do whatever I have to do. I'm going to work out. Then I'll take a look at the email. It's going to be there, right? And again, if it's an emergency, your troops are going to know how to get a hold of you or your boss or somebody else. So get the day right. Center yourself before you have to tackle the day and figure out how to deal with stress. And also make sure you tackle the toughest things first, right? So whatever, I don't want you to tackle low-hanging fruit. Whatever is the most important, most hardest thing you have to do that day, whether it's a personnel issue, a budget issue, or what have you, do that first. Get that out of the way, right? And then make sure the rest of your day clear. The other thing is to remember the first rule as a leader is to make sure you're taking care of your team. Selflessness, right? They come first. And so you make sure that you're doing everything you can in terms of mentoring and one-on-ones and all the things you need to do to stay on top of what your troops are doing, not micromanaging. You give them the leeway to run their operations and even to make mistakes if they have to, so they learn from them. But you make sure that your mindset is that you take care of them first. The other thing is that continuous learning. You know, read. Okay, leaders are readers. We've heard that before, and it's true. You can't be an effective leader if you don't read. Read fiction if you want, but you should read biographies. You should read leadership books. You should read things that continue to grow your leadership acumen so you can move forward and become a better leader each and every single day. The other thing is that do not be afraid to take on new challenges, come up with new ideas, stretch the boundaries of your organization, even if it seems a little wacky. You know, we did that at Microsoft at Global Security by building out the 3 Global Security Operations Centers that at the time was unheard of, and we got it done, and people didn't think we could do it, but we did it. And but it made our organization a lot better because we stretched ourselves, right? So make sure as you go into 2025, be bold, be imaginative, and be creative. Have fun with it. I think one of the other things in 2025 is to remember that to stay humble. You know, you have too many leaders out there that are, again, I hark to Washington, D.C. Too many of them have big fat egos, big heads, and they forgot what got them, right? So stay grounded, stay humble. Remember that things could be taken away right away, right? And you could be fired. There could be reductions in force, and your whole security department is gone, or what have you. So just stay grounded. And remember, as Colin Powell used to say, it'll look better in the AM. Now, you may have the same crap on your plate tomorrow morning as you do today, but it's a mindset that tomorrow will be a better day because your troops need to see that you are thinking that way, that tomorrow will be a better day. There are going to be certainly a lot more challenges. Every year is more challenging than the previous year, and for those of you who are still in business, still leaders, whether in government or business, you are faced with a faster paced environment. You're faced with global challenges that seem to never end. You're dealing with budgetary issues, never enough resources or money or headcount to get what you need done. And you're dealing obviously probably with struggling with the same things everybody else struggles with. Family members that have health problems. Maybe you've got some financial issues, or you've got some relationship issues, or whatever it is. That's part of life, right? That's life. That's the way life is. Life is messy, but you don't have to be, right? If you ground yourself, if you have studied the right role models, if you are continuing to check your ego at the door, if you're continuing to do the best things for your team, if you're willing to take a hit when things go wrong and accept blame, even if it wasn't your fault, but it happened in your organization, if you're willing to do all these things, then next year will show an increase in your leadership acumen. You'll be better and better and better. You won't be perfect. You're never going to be perfect. You're always going to be growing and learning. But you will get to the point where you're comfortable in your own skin, right? Remember, at the end of the day, leadership is never easy. It's not meant to be easy, and it's not for everybody. It's definitely not for everybody. Do not emulate the folks in politics or media or celebrities or anybody else like that. There are very few leaders in any of those areas. Trust me, very few leaders. Not that business people are all great leaders, but one thing about business is that there are P&Ls. And if there aren't enough P's versus L's in your particular organization, you'll probably be fired, right? Or things will change. Well, you never see that in government, ever. Things can go south and people just still carry on with their business. So 2025, you should go into it with a positive attitude. And you undoubtedly are already facing challenges that you know you're going to have to deal with in 2025, but that's okay. That's okay. I think if I can leave you one last thing, and a lot of this comes from both my Christian faith as well as Stoicism, is you have to live in the present, right? Doesn't mean you can't be strategic. You have to be. You have to be ready for any challenges ahead. But be present, because I think it's important to not dwell too much on any mistakes that you may have made in the past, or even successes, because that is not necessarily a precursor of future success, right? You always have to keep challenging yourself. And looking too far ahead in terms of worrying about it is not going to help you either, because worry actually takes away from your ability to be as effective a leader as you can be. So be present and relish the moment that you're in, even if it's chaos and crisis and there's been an explosion in London and you've got to manage figuring out whether any of your employees are involved or whatever the situation is in your particular enterprise. Just revel in that moment. That moment won't come again. And I always, a leader once told me years ago, said, Mike, if you think about something that was probably dogging you or bothering you back in 1989, 90, 91, 92, as I was starting my leadership journey at CIA, and at that moment, whatever that issue was, that crisis was was probably the most momentous thing that was, in front of you, and you were obsessing over it and probably had sleepless nights over it. Can you even remember what that was? And I said, no. And you're absolutely right. So whatever crisis situation you and your team are dealing with right now or will be dealing with in 2025, yeah, you deal with it, right? You deal with it. But just remember, in 10 years from now, you probably won't even remember it. And that's important. What's most important is family and your friends, your health. Those are the things that are most critical. Enterprises come and go. CSOs come and go. Politicians come and go, all that kind of stuff. But what's most important as a leader to stay grounded is that actually forgot also your faith, right? Whatever your faith may be, but your faith, your family, your friends, your health, those are the most important things. So as we go into this Christmas and New Year's part of the year, just remember that. Take time. You need to take time to decompress and just enjoy your family and friends. And then be ready to start the new year full of vim and vigor and ready to tackle anything that comes your way. We'll have a lot of good content. I've got in 2025, my new book will be coming out in 2025, another Jack Trench thriller, and so I'll be posting more about that later. In the meantime, I'm wishing all of you a very Merry Christmas, because I don't do Happy Holidays. Brave New World now, okay? You can say Merry Christmas without worrying about offending anybody. So, very Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and here's to a great 2025. Thanks again for all your support. See you in 2025.